One day, I decided to teach my 4-year-old son to play chess with an opaque and transparent glass set on my natural wooden kitchen table. I told him that we play with 2 colors. Then I pointed to a frosted opaque square and asked him to guess which color it is. He said, white. I let him know he was correct, then pointed at the clear square and asked him which color it was. He said, brown. I said, no, it's... His facial expression was incredulous, as I was about to attempt to explain to him that what actually is really isn't, when I realized that I was actually trying to explain what actually isn't really is. My little boy had made an astute observation in how much we're all conditioned to invest and acknowledge what isn't real, even though it's as obvious as a black person's brown skin or a white person's pink skin. I laughed then, but lately. Welcome to the show. My name is Eric Edwards, and you're listening to the Tacklebox Podcast. People of hue. Haven't heard that term before, have you? Yeah. See, the people who made up race weren't very smart, unless you call divisiveness smart, because people are not actually of color, they are of hue. The terms that they came up with, well, the 2 terms that we have left over anyway, black and white, are not hues. They're more like shades. And the whole idea of race is quite shady. So who came up with this stuff? Race. A lot of people like to deny where the origin of this came from. I think deep down people know who made this up. Supremacists. Yes, people with a God complex who weren't very smart, but were very divisive and greedy. They came up with this concept of color. And now we're left with this binary, monochromatic scheme to get over on people called race, which is described by color that people actually are not. Some smart people have noted that we are all a hue of brown. What is pigment? The pigment in our skin? It is brown. Some people have less pigment. Some people have more. But it's all brown. Unless you're talking of people who are void of pigment, which are more commonly known as albinos, who are very rare. But still, even these people are defined by color for some reason. Well, it's not some reason, it's divisiveness. People aren't defined by color because of what the hue of their skin is. They're defined by color by the origin of their ancestors. This thing is meant to be, or meant to sound complicated. So complicated that people don't want to think about it. People just accept this concept as is. They take it for granted. Of course I'm white. Of course I'm black. Couldn't be more wrong. There's no white land. There's no black land. People are not of these colors. There's no country named after them. There's no ethnicity named after black and white. Totally made up concept. Now, you have people, whether they think like liberals or conservatives, or whatever type of ideology they like to claim, who will testify to the fact that race is a social construct. Okay, we all know that. But then after that, people don't know what to do with this concept. They still accept it as reality. It is not. The idea of racial identity. You know, this concept is relatively new the way we use it now. Racial classification has been around for some time. It wasn't taken quite seriously until the New World was founded. But yeah, people have been classified by race for a while. It just wasn't a big deal. But here we are now, and it's got to be one of the biggest deals on the planet, besides the concept of organized religion and, of course, class. You have to go back to Virginia, good old USA, Virginia, when race started to become something that was actually taken seriously. And in fact, in Virginia, 1691, the idea of race was codified into law. People who were not white, by law, were not to be treated as equals. This came about after what was called Bacon's Rebellion. People of all classifications, people of hue, came together in America, the New World, start a new beginning. As it went, some people thought it would be a good idea to start this oppression thing to exploit other people all over again. Except they wouldn't be the ones being exploited. They would find people unlike themselves to exploit. It came to a head in Virginia on the basis of class. And this is going to sound like a familiar story. It sounds like maybe I'm talking about current events. But you had a small minority of rich people who exploited the majority of poor people, exploited them, used them to get what they wanted. And eventually the people of hue, they caught on to what was going on. And this included white people, of course, or so-called white people. All these people from all different backgrounds, they caught on to these oppression tactics, and they wanted to burn the place down to send a message. Had they been more organized, we might not have the idea of classification today. Unfortunately, they were stomped out and put down. Afterwards, the people, the greedy, stupid people, they had to think of another way to divide. Class was not working anymore. Religion was not working anymore. And that is when the idea of race became what they call a thing. White people, other people. And ever since then, you had people dividing themselves along these terms of color. It didn't matter anymore how poor a so-called white person was. Now a floor had been established. With this new racial classification, you were guaranteed not to have the problems that the people under this racial classification floor would have. You would not have those problems. You can have any other type of problem, but you won't have a problem about the way you look. That was the floor. The beginning of racial classification. Exploited so-called white people bought into this. They bought into the God complex of superiority. A white movement began. People of Europe began to flee and flock from the oppression of the old world and take advantage of this new world where you could become what you wanted to. the come up. You could make it here. You could be an individual. You can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. This is where it comes from, right? Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make something of yourself. You could do that. Why? Because you're white. And when you're white, well, sky's the limit in America, the new world. People bought into this and made a tradition of it. They made a tradition of exploiting the misfortunes of people not considered white. They didn't get it automatically. No. There was initiation, tryouts. I'm specifically referring to Catholics, Polish, Italians. For some reason, Catholics were treated differently than Protestants. So when you came over here as a Catholic, you had to earn your stripes as a white person. You had to put in work. Sometimes that included, or most times, that included indentured servitude. You would work off either a debt, or maybe perhaps you were accused of a crime and you were sentenced to work for so long. And at the end of that contract, then you became the individual that you wanted to be. Then you could chase your dreams. Then you could build your family up and create wealth for them to pass down through generations. You had to earn it. And sure enough, these immigrants went along with the program. We've all heard the stories of how the Irish were treated, how Italians were treated, how Polish were treated. And this kept up for a while. And it wasn't just a short initiation period. This went on for centuries of immigrants having to prove their worth. But these people of a darker hue, nah, not so much. It is what it is, or it was what it was with them. Stuck below that racial classification floor. This became tradition, and this is how we live our lives now, a racial classification. We have to deprogram ourselves. We must do better than racial classification. There is classification which is legitimate. It's called ethnicity. Ethnicity is about community, the way people worship, the way they speak, the way they express themselves in art. Race is how people define strangers, or this is how they identify strangers. You use race. They're Asian, they're Latino, they're black, they're what? These things mean nothing. Nothing at all. They're based on geography. They're based on nonsensical idea of color. They're based on religion. They're based on language. But this is not how people identify themselves. This is how people identify people who are different than them. Ethnicity is how people define themselves. This is how they introduce themselves. I am, okay? I am Celt. I am Cherokee. I am Igbo. I am Chihuahua. Ethnicity. This is how people should identify themselves. Because of what race did to this world, the idea, the concept of it, which included chattel slavery, which was an ethnic cleansing of people. Some people don't know what their old world ethnicity is, especially black people, especially Latinos. So black people, and I'm talking about the descendants of slaves. I am not talking about Africans. Africans have ethnicity. They have their sense of culture intact for the most part. So I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about ADOS, African descendants of slaves. They have no ethnicity because that ethnicity was stripped of them. So black people are black because black represents the void, a black void of ethnicity. And people today are white because their ancestors, they left it behind. They abandoned it. Like I said before, the main reason for people coming to the New World was because they were being oppressed by the other concepts I mentioned before. But it's just so-called white people today cannot relate to the culture that was left behind. Therefore, they're white. They don't have to be white. They do not have to be white. White people do not have to identify themselves as a supremacist label. This is tradition. Tradition that should have been left alone a long time ago. But because of the idea that the concept of race is so complex, something not to think about, something to just let be, we still have white people today. And people that can't let go. There has to come to a point where there is no longer an incentive for people to be white. We have to come to a point where there is no incentive for people to identify themselves as a racial classification if they don't have to. How do we get there? Unfortunately, because of the way this system has been built, the future holds nothing but confrontation. A member of my discussion group told me more than a few times that everyone is a shade of brown. My initial thought was, fuck out of here, pink ass motherfucker. But I let the idea marinate in my mind and thought about it some more. All the elements that are in the earth's soil are in us as well. From the dirt, as people like to say. We're all dirty. And if that's what it takes for everyone to see the humanity in each other instead of geographical, religious, and color identifiers, then I'll give his dirty ass all the credit for a wonderful concept. Well, that's the show. If you are not a member of the Tackle Box discussion group on Facebook, I encourage you to join today. If you are a member, I'd like to thank you for your contributions. On behalf of the Tackle Box administration, my name is Eric Edwards. I'd like to thank you for listening. Take care.